Hi, I'm Summer Stroud, and I'm here with Kate and Katie, and they're with Community Coalition Against Human Trafficking, and I'm here to ask them a few questions. Kate, could you tell me briefly about the origin and mission of Community Coalition?
Sure. The Community Coalition was founded in 2010 by a group of individuals who were doing international anti-trafficking work.
Yeah.
They started asking the question, what's happening in our own community? And they spent about a year doing a lot of research and realized that there was trafficking happening in East Tennessee, but there weren't really any organizations leading the anti-trafficking movement. So after talking with a lot of players across the state of Tennessee and locally, they didn't want to start a nonprofit just to start one because there's so many great causes already. They wanted to make sure it was really filling a need. So after a lot of research and effort, they decided to officially launch the coalition in 2010. We were originally focused on education and awareness because at the time we couldn't find a victim of trafficking if we wanted to. We had to have the foundation of awareness to understand what we were looking for and know how to identify a victim before we could actually then start thinking about providing services for those survivors. So we started out all focused on education and awareness. And then over the past 6 to 7 years, we've morphed a little bit as an organization. And now we are launching into providing direct services for victims. We do referral services now, wraparound services, some case management for survivors of trafficking. We operate a locally focused task force to help provide a space where lots of organizations and lots of law enforcement agencies can come together and support each other, and knowing that it takes all of us to respond in an appropriate way. So I think we're really proud of the accomplishments of our organization and what we've achieved over the past almost 7 years, and we're really excited to see what happens in the next 7 years.
Yeah, and so what are both of y'all's roles within Community Coalition?
So I'm the executive director of the Community Coalition. I came on board in 2014 as actually the first ever paid full-time executive director. Prior to 2014, we had a great group of dedicated volunteers that were sort of at the helm of our organization. And after a lot of really successful accomplishments in those first 4 or 5 years, they knew they needed to get someone officially on board as the executive director. So we were awarded a pretty significant grant, which gave them the space to hire and bring on someone. So I was really excited to take on this role about 2 years ago.
That's awesome. And what about you?
So I'm the operations coordinator for the coalition, and I came on board in April of this year. Prior to that, I had been working with the coalition in a volunteer capacity. I think because there are 2 of us on staff, we both wear many different hats, anything from communications to working with survivors to working with donors and volunteers.
I've heard that your company is a lot, or your organization is a lot about partnerships, and so what does that look like?
As Kate kind of touched on, especially when we were formed, we were focused on education and awareness, and definitely wanted to make sure before the organization was formed that we weren't, forming a nonprofit that was duplicating anything that was already being provided in the region. And we hold true to that, especially as we're moving into direct services. We have more than 20 partners across East Tennessee and across the state that we work with consistently all the time, from anything to mental health care, medical care, legal aid for survivors. And essentially our belief is that we don't want to come into a space and reinvent the wheel. And if good work is already being done in this region, we want to do our part to strengthen that work being done and step into a space where we can fill a gap instead of doing something that others are already doing really well.
What is something that a lot of people don't know about your organization?
It's a great question. So, and you'll see from this diagram that's up on the screen now that this is what we call the single point of contact system. And the state of Tennessee has adopted this model at the beginning of 2016. And essentially the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation has direct or primary jurisdiction over all human trafficking cases in the state. And with that, the governor has empowered that agency to have ownership of all of those cases. With that empowerment, the TBI and other agencies across the state recognize that our ability to hold perpetrators accountable is directly linked to our ability to serve survivors of this crime. And so we have to do a better job as a state of serving those survivors in a holistic capacity. And so the state has adopted the single point of contact agency model, which essentially means that regardless of the part of state the part of the state a survivor is identified in, they have access, easy and smooth access to equitable services. So the TBI has identified 4 agencies across the state to lead and be the single point of contact agency in their region. We are the single point of contact agency for all of Upper East Tennessee. So essentially Knox County, Loudoun County, all the way to Johnson City, which is a pretty wide surface area to cover. But East Tennessee as a whole is about half the state. So we knew we needed to break it up into Upper East, Lower East, Middle, and West Tennessee. So our agency is a single point of contact for all of Upper East, and with that we receive all referrals from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, from DCS, from the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Any reported potential incident or identified survivor in Upper East Tennessee is funneled through our agency. So we can at least, whether we're providing those services directly or we're referring that survivor on to receive those services in the county in which she lives, we're assuring her that we will make sure she gets the services she needs, and that no survivor is going to slip through the cracks in our state.
What are some ways that the community can help you with your endeavors?
Because we're such a small organization staff-wise, we do rely a lot on volunteers, and we're lucky to have a lot of really great volunteers plugged into the organization. There are a couple of really, I guess, more significant ways that folks can get involved. One of those is a program called Allies for Change, and through that program we pair 5 to 7 women, because the majority of the clients that we serve are women, but we pair 5 to 7 women with a survivor just to kind of be a support system for her and surround her with kind of a family unit. A lot of the clients that we work with haven't really felt that and haven't really had that before, and so it's a great way to kind of come around those clients and love on them and form friendships with them. And while we are providing or connecting them with medical care or mental health care or legal aid, there are a lot of life skills and smaller things that they can gain through these friendships with the women who come alongside them, whether it's saying, hey, come over, I found this new recipe, let's make a meal together tonight, or how's your day going, do you want to go see a movie tomorrow? So that's one really big way that folks can get involved. Another thing that we have going on right now is called the Speakers Bureau, and it's especially for folks who are more inclined to do public speaking oriented things. We have volunteers who help us out with speaking engagements in Knoxville and Upper East Tennessee. We get asked to do a lot of trainings with churches and community organizations. This helps us continue to be in more than one place at a time to facilitate those trainings. And so those are the 2 big ways that folks can get involved.
Since the Community Coalition has been active, what are some issues that you've seen or dealt with?
That's a great question. I think part of, or one of the biggest issues that we have been faced with is really a lack of awareness about the reality of trafficking in our community and what that looks like. I think there's a lot of misconceptions around trafficking and how that happens in East Tennessee. And so one of the things that we have seen, aside from the statistic that there are more slaves now than at any other time in the history of the world, there are some researchers that say there's roughly 45 million people enslaved in the world today, which is just astronomical to think about. But what does that look like in our community? I think historically we've had this view that most victims are probably young girls brought over from Cambodia or Thailand and locked in a basement, and while sure that might happen every now and then, the reality of what it looks like in East Tennessee is a little different than that, and the scope of what it looks like in East Tennessee is different than that. Most people think that it probably happens here or there or in large metropolitan cities like New York and LA, but it's happening in Knoxville. There is a research study done by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation several years ago that said Knox County specifically had over 100 cases of trafficking in a year, which is sort of mind-blowing to think about. And at the time, what we knew to be happening in 2011 and 12 and 13 when the study was done was really just the tip of the iceberg of what we see now. So if we were to do that research again, I'm sure those numbers would be much more significant than just that 100 within Knox County. One of the other things that we have seen is we talk about survivors of trafficking being female. We identify her and the perpetrator as a he, and we do that because the statistics tell us that's true. About 80% of victims of trafficking are women, and about 50% of them are children. So our girls, and the average age of entry into trafficking is just 14 or 15 years old, which is incredibly young. I think some of the other things we've been faced with in learning through the survivors that we've worked with, that the majority of the women we work with are from East Tennessee. They're U.S. citizens. They are from our communities. They were born and raised here. They're not typically people from other countries or undocumented citizens brought over, foreign nationals, and held in captivity in East Tennessee. That happens here and there, but the majority of the time, those victimized in our community are from our communities. And I think that is one of the major realities that we have worked hard to uncover and really spread the word on that, because I think that brings the issue home and it helps keep us, it's easy to digest this information when we can say, oh, that happens to somebody else somewhere else. But when we can bring that, the reality of that home, I think that it weighs heavier on us, and I think the burden then is on us to do something. And so I think that's really what we have strived to communicate over the past almost 7 years.
What makes Community Coalition so passionate about their mission?
I think one of the things that I'm most excited about and what makes me love our work so much is that we really want to operate in a space where we break the mold a little bit. I think many nonprofits have functioned over the past years in sort of following what federal grants will provide or what insurance will cover, and I think over the course of the past 10 or 15 years, we've realized that that doesn't really work, that that's providing services in a really small way or services to only a really small group of people, and it doesn't give us the space to do the comprehensive work that's really needed. You know, a survivor doesn't just need a safe roof over her head. She needs all of the things that sort of by default many of us have received over the course of our lives. Social safety net, love, some of those soft skills, life skills that Katie talked about earlier when we were talking about our Allies for Change program. And so our organization is really wanting to function in the space of we can do this better. We can raise the bar on what social service looks like in our community, and you know, we really want to break the mold and to say there is no service, that every path towards restoration looks different, and we want to identify that individual path and honor each one of the individual survivors we work with by helping her choose her own path and walking with her in that. And so I think that is one of the reasons why I love working for this organization so much, is we have the freedom to do that, which is really beautiful.
Well, thank you for answering some questions. Community Coalition is doing great work, and I'm really excited to see where it's going to lead. I'm Summer Stroud, and this is...
I'm Kate Trudeau.
I'm Katie Little.
Thank you for being with us today.